Çok muhterem
Ladies and gentlemen, dear invitees and guests,
muhterem davetliler, hanımefendiler, beyefendiler. Bugün bu
today we are going to talk about the permission procedures relating to wind power plants. Our panelists are specialist people who work as public officials relating to these permission procedures. Let's try to find answers as to how we can facilitate wind power plant permissions. We will be sharing with you the key issues throughout this procedure.
nasıl engellemeden en süratli bir şekilde nasıl çıkartırız üzerinde çalışmış olan arkadaşlarımız. Bu konudaki temel takıntıları, temel noktaları bize açıklayacaklar. Ben yalnız şunu ifade etmek istiyorum. Yani yenilenebilir enerjide Türkiye hakikaten
But I'd like to say that especially after the law which was published in 2005, Turkey has shown an exponential growth. However, our goal for 2023 shows that even this progress is not enough. Our pace of growth will only lead us to a 6,000 megawatts by 2023. Other countries all over the world have progressed a lot, especially in renewable energies, including wind and solar power. According to the declarations made by international associations on wind energy, by 2016, the potential of wind will probably reach 500,000 megawatts.
500 megawatt civarında olacağı şu anda görülen bir potansiyel. 2016 belki 17 yıllarında bu rakamlara ulaşacak.
Solar power has already exceeded figures like 100,000 megawatts. That's why we need to shorten the licensing procedures as much as possible.
Lisans sürelerini mümkün olduğu kadar kısaltmamız gerekir. Formaliteleri azaltmamız gerekir. Ve ben esas motivasyon kaynağı olan
I know the purchase warrants declared by our parliament when it comes to renewable energies and wind power, but the new developments show that our figures relating to purchase warrants are more realistic.
bu rakamların tırpanlandığını biliyorum. Ama şu anda bunlara baktığımızda bizim komisyondan çıkan rakamların daha bilimsel, daha doğru ve daha gerçekçi olduğunu olaylar bize gösteriyor. Çünkü bugün
Those who generate energy through wind power plants don't sell with the figures which were determined by the purchase warrant in our parliament. They charge higher prices in the market. That's why we had increased the prices of the purchase warrant. One other aim we have is to see the technologies developing in this field. Germany has been carrying out intense R&D facilities, especially relating to solar energies. It also has provided a new subsidy mechanism.
çıkarmıştır. O da enerji depolama ile alakalı Ar-Ge üzerinde depolama çalışmasını yapan ve bununla ilgili Ar-Ge yapanlar için sayıları çıkarmıştır. Dünyada
According to the figures announced by the World Patent Institute, thousands of patents are obtained every day relating to solar energy.
depolama, lityum pilleri ve güneş enerjisi üstünde her gün binlerce, yılda on binlerce patentler almaktadır. Yani bir hatırladığım kadarıyla 2012
In 2012, 181,000 patents were obtained, and 13% of these patents are related to renewables. We might be realistic and follow up these numbers all over the world. That's how we can carry Turkey to a higher speed.
hangi seviyedeyse hiç olmazsa o seviyeye yakalayıp oradan alıp götürmek arzusu idi. Ama bütün bunlara rağmen Türkiye'de şu anda yine
Awareness of renewables is increasing in Turkey,
mantalite, anlayış, her şeyden önce bilinç ve kavramda çok önemli gelişmeler var. Bu yönüyle
which is a source of joy for us.
İnşallah önümüzdeki günlerde bununla ilgili çok daha önemli gelişmeler olacak. Ben fazla uzatmak istemiyorum. Şimdi Selami Bey'den başlayalım.
Let's start listening to our panelists who will introduce themselves to you.
Okuyarak vaktinizi almak istemiyorum. Kendileri çok az, özet olarak kendilerini, çalıştığı kurumu ve anlatacağı konuyu arkadaşlarımız izah ederek konuşmalarına başlarlarsa çok sevinirim. Çok teşekkür ederim.
Thank you very much for coming here. I'd like to greet you all on behalf of the General Directorate of Meteorology. I'm the head of the Office for Data Control and Statistics. Our directorate started its involvement in the generation of electricity with wind and renewables in 2005. Firstly, EMRA has published a measurement standard, communique, in 2012. And according to the communique, General Directorate of Meteorology is responsible for the measurement. The aim was to ensure that all the measurements were in compliance with the existing standards and to draw up reports based on the data that was obtained. There was an amendment in the communique in 2013. In 2013, a new law on the electricity market was published, which governed license and pre-licensing procedures. According to the law, the license and pre-license applications are required to include wind and radiation measures of at least 1 year, which will have been recorded over the previous 3 years. The regulation on the electricity market licenses is quite new, and the Article 12 of the regulation sets forth the same conditions for the measures. For the pre-license, the site should be already installed and the measures should be provided. And these reports for measures should be submitted at the General Directorate of Meteorology. Together with our General Directorate, another accredited institution is also responsible for these measures. This article sets forth which kind of measures are required. The wind measurement tower should be minimum 60 meters, for example, and the measurements should be made at two levels, one being at the 30th meter and the other being at the top point of this tower. Pressure, temperature and humidity measures should be carried out at minimum 3 meters. The data and these measurements will be kept by the General Directorate or by this accredited institution as confidential information.
Yönetmelikte ölçüm hangi şeylerin madde 39'da hangi ölçümlerin yapılacağını belirtiyor. En az 60 metre yükseklikte bir direk olmalı ve en az 2 seviyede 30 metre ve en üst seviyede olmak üzere daha da fazla seviyede ölçüm yapılabilir. Ve diğer ölçümler basınç sıcaklık ve nem ölçümleri 3 metrede yapılabilir. Burada yeni olarak 3. madde var. MGM ve ilgili agresif kuruluşa sunulan veriler ticari sır niteliğinde olan bilgilerin saklanması ve korunması. Gene ilgili MGM'nin sorumluluğundadır. Tabii bununla ilgili gerekli tedbirleri kurum almak durumunda. Evet, bu yönetmelikten sonra Meteoroloji Genel Müdürlüğü de mevcut tebliğini bu yönetmelik doğrultusunda değişikliğe önümüzdeki süreç içerisinde başlayacak. Fakat tebliğin öngördüğü fazla bir değişiklik de yok. Şu anda Meteoroloji Genel Müdürlüğü
Among the responsibilities of the General Directorate are to confirm and certify the installation report and the measurement report during the pre-license period. Measurements are initiated after a measurement station is installed and the General Directorate approves it. Measurements should be related to the pressure, humidity and temperature, and they should take place at least at two levels, one being at a 60 meter height and the other at a 30 meter height. Data can be lost at a rate of 20%. When this percentage is exceeded, unfortunately the validity of measurements loses its validity. A 20% data loss can also be completed by some special technologies. The measurement station to be installed should be in compliance with the standards. Applications should be made at the General Directorate for approval of these stations. 15 days after the application, the General Directorate pays a visit to the station to check whether it is in compliance with the standards. After the approval of our General Directorate, measurements are initiated. Data that's obtained daily should be communicated to our General Directorate for a period of 1 year. The investor company draws up a report based on the data obtained which is again submitted at the General Directorate for approval. And if the data and measurements are correctly made, the General Directorate approves its compliance for a pre-license application. There are some documents which should be included in the application for measurements. This is the application form that should be filled in. Parameters measured at the station are the speed of the wind, temperature and pressure.
Ölçüm direğinin standartlara uygun şekilde kurulması ve herhangi bir güvenlik şartlarının sağlanması için gerekli tebliğde gerekli tavsiyeler yapılmış.
Here are the conditions for the measurement tower. It should also ensure the safety standards, safety measures, and technical specifications are also included here.
Tabii ölçümde hata eğer çok olursa tabii ki bu ölçümden elde edilecek enerjide de mesela 6 metre saniyelik rüzgar hızında 0.4 metre saniyelik doğu bulutta çalışan bir algometre %20'ye varan hatalara sebep olmaktadır. Bu nedenle ölçümlerin sağlıklı olması gerekmektedir.
Plus minus 20% mistake is predicted during the measures. Here are the technical specifications for measurement devices. Here are the pictures as to how to comply with the standards. This was a record device, and the tower should be completely solid so as to not fall down during harsh wind conditions. The data should be daily sent to the General Directorate, and there is a fixed computer at our General Directorate for this transaction. The content of the files is also provided for. The files should contain 144 records for 1 day. And if the wind is measured at 4 levels, the number of records for wind should be 576. There should be 2 files for wind measures, one including the specifics of the wind and the other containing details such as temperature and pressure. After this 1-year period is completed,
alması gerekiyor. Ölçüm sonuç raporunun hazırlandıktan sonra Meteoroloji Genel Müdürlüğü'ne
a measurement result report should be drawn up,
başvuru yapılır.
which should be sent to our General Directorate with an application. There are 3 attachments to be included within the application. The applicant is responsible for the accuracy of the data sent to the General Directorate. All the evaluations will be considered accurate. The General Directorate is only responsible for the approval of the forms issued in compliance with solar and wind measurements.
Yer almaktadır. Ölçüm sonuç raporunu hazırladıktan sonra yine Meteoroloji Genel Müdürlüğü'ne başvuruluyor ve başvuruda bu
The application should include all the forms that I previously mentioned.
eke konuyor. Sadece formlar değil, ölçtükleri
Raw materials of the data measured should also be included.
Meteoroloji Genel Müdürlüğü'ne teslim ediliyor. Başvuru
There are also some documents for application.
maddeler halinde yer almakta. Evet, ölçüm sonuç raporunda hesaplamalar yapmak için en az bir yıllık veri olması lazım.
In order to calculate the data measured, there should be a compilation of data for 1 year.
Fazla veri kaybı olabilir.
There might be a data loss at a rate of 20% relating to the speed of the wind, direction of the wind, which were measured at 2 levels, temperature and pressure. Your calculations cannot contradict the data that you obtain during your measurements. Insufficient data should be supplemented.
Selamünaleyküm. Vaktimiz doldu.
Bitirmek üzere. Şu anda meteoroloji
We have been receiving applications since 2012 and approving measurement result reports.
14 Haziran tarihleri arasındaki EPDK'ya başvurudan 10 gün önce Meteoroloji Genel Müdürlüğü'nden ölçüm sonuç raporu almak zorundaydılar. O işlemleri tamamladık. Rüzgar için de son bir aydır
In the last 1 month, we have received quite a lot of applications for the establishment of wind measuring stations.
hesaplamalar yapılması gerekiyor. En son
The last time I asked, there were applications and the number was 337. The highest number of applications are mostly spread around Çanakkale. Thank you very much.
Evet, çok teşekkür ederiz.
It looks like enterprises are working in collaboration with the General Directorate of Meteorology. Now your office is a more active one. Now you get to know Turkey even better, step by step, everything related to the wind and solar power the country has. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm representing the General Directorate of Mining Affairs. I'm going to mention the relation between the mining affairs and wind energy.
Rüzgar enerjisi arasındaki ilişki sizlere sunmaya çalışacağız. Bu da gördüğüm kadarıyla ve dün ve bugünkü yapılan toplantılar izlediğim kadarıyla belki görülebilen, belki tam farkına varıldığında biraz şüphe duyduğum bir konu diye düşünüyorum. Çünkü sonuçta
There is an obvious relation between the places where the wind energy is generated and the places where our mines are located. This creates some problems. We need to generate solutions to it. That's how we can gain each of our resources to our economy. Let me first refer to the definition of mines in the law for mining affairs. All kinds of substances naturally found on earth and in springs having economical and commercial value are considered as mines. The law excludes some resources such as petrol and gas. These kinds of natural resources are subject to their own legislation.
sunumumuz burada laptoptaki gibi gözükmediğini görüyorum. 6
Our mines are classified under 6 categories, and these categories govern the procedures for licensing. According to the constitutional law, our mines are natural resources and secured by the state. Pursuant to the constitutional law again, the state has the right to operate and work on the mines, but it has reserved the right to transfer this right to legal entities. The Turkish mining law also stipulates the same thing. Mines are under the sovereignty and disposition of the state, not subject to the land ownership on where they exist. But these terms may be easily misunderstood. For example, when the license holders enjoy the right to operate on these mines, they get to mistake it with the right to land. There is also disinformation about the foreign license holders who are considered to be enjoying our land, but this is not the case. These mines are ours. They belong to our people. In a way, the state transfers the right to operate these mines, and it somehow hires these mines to legal entities. We should take a closer look at the relation between the mines and wind energy. As you know, mines are not considered and included within the context of renewables, but they are among the raw materials in the country. That's why they are so valuable, both in terms of our industry and exports. And the new amendments made in the mining law in 2010 aim to create a joint system which acted as a database so that all the natural resources, including the mines and other renewables, could be analyzed. According to the amendments, the General Directorate for Mining Affairs should be informed of any kind of activities relating to the national protected areas or World Heritage areas, as well as of the investment areas for which new energy plants, power plants like wind power plants are about to be installed. We wanted this amendment because we wanted to see and categorize the areas for new investments. Once we receive applications from people who would like to operate a mine, we process their information on our database and see which category they belong to. This is how we also avoid any misunderstandings in the future or any inconvenient situations before granting of a license.
Yatırımından dolayı bir sıkıntı çekmemesini sağlamak için yapılmış bir tedbirdir. Tabii ki bu bağlamda 2010
Before 2010, there wasn't a set perception of management relating to wind power plants. In the past, EMRA used to issue licenses for wind power plants, whereas we granted licenses for the same area for mining affairs. This all caused investments to be wasted in a way. These amendments help us record any kind of sensitive areas and any kind of investment areas.
Bu nedenle biz 2010 senesinde yapmış olduğumuz değişiklikle özellikle bahsi geçen
All these areas are recorded in our databases.
üzere sistemimizde bunların işlenmesini öngördük. Ve bahsettiğim üzere bu alanlar bilgi işlem sistem kayıtlarında görülmekte.
So once license holders apply for mining operations, we grant them a period of 1 year for their investments, and we only issue a license for them once they receive necessary permits for that area. This is how we facilitate the process in front of our investors. Energy plans within the concept of wind power plants have a place in that law thanks to the amendments again, and according to the related article, in the event that mining activities and public benefit investments such as city roads, railways, airports, energy plants, natural gas and water conveyance lines obstruct each other, and that carrying out mining activity has become impossible, and that there are no alternative areas for the investment, then the board, as we call it, shall decide on the mining activity and the investment.
Maden Kanunu'nun yine 7. maddesinin 16. fıkrası kapsamında öncelikli olarak yatırımın
If there are two applications for the same area, we need to compare the applicants. If the General Directorate decides that other investments will not impede mining activities for the areas excluding the proven reserve areas, which are determined upon documentation of existence, as well as investments made to determine proven reserve in licensed fields and made for works like boring, etc., then other investment shall be permitted. If there is a matter affecting the investment made by the license holder in the licensed area, the decision related to this area shall be taken by the board. And these fields are almost always analyzed on the site. In case of coincidence between a wind power plant and a mining area, we ask the investor to draw up a report. The investor is asked to draw up a report as well, and we create a comparison table. Here we take into consideration which investment will bring the highest benefit for our country. If we notice that both activities are possible, of course we permit both license holders to carry out operations. In cases where it's possible to benefit from both resources, technically, we refer the situation to the board.
Olmadığı takdirde bu durumda biz tabii kurul mekanizmasına devreye sokuyoruz. Kurul devlet planlama teşkilatının bağlı olduğu bakanlık, yani bugünkü ismi
The Ministry of Development chairs the board. The Minister of Energy and Natural Resources is among the members of the board. The third member of the board is the Minister for Technology and Science.
olduğu için ve PDK tarafından da lisanslandığı için bakanlığımızla ilişkili bir kuruş olduğundan dolayı bu durumda Sayın Bakanımızın tabii ikinci kez üye olması söz konusu olmadığı için bu durumlarda Bilim ve Sanayi Ticaret ve Teknoloji Bakanımız bu kurulun 3. üyesi olur. Küçük bir bakanlar kurulu diyebilirsiniz. Kurul toplantılarını oluşturuyor, gerekirse raporları hazırlatıyor.
While comparing the two applications, we always take into account the benefits that two investments can bring to the country in terms of productivity and other conditions, including profitability and employment. The mines should be worked on at the site. That's why we sometimes come up with some alternatives for wind power plants. We are checking whether we can somehow shift the turbines depending on the type of the investment. We organize meetings with the investor companies, during which we try to analyze the position of the turbines and possibilities around that. In cases where we reach an agreement between the investors and our directorate, we don't refer the situation to the board. But in cases where the board decides in favor of wind power plants, our requirement is to meet the investments that the mining operators had made in the area up to date. I'm not talking about compensation. I'm talking about the investments made in the area, including the machinery, installations and equipment. The board always takes into account the public benefit first. And how we operate, what is our role as the General Directorate for Mining Affairs within this process? We don't necessarily experience people coming up to us for opinion. We are only consulted for our opinions during when conditions urge the investors to draw up an environmental evaluation report. All license holders, in order to avoid any problems in the future, visit us to make sure that their invested fields are processed in our databases. We receive applications during the environmental reports, and our most important criteria include the existence of a license or at least existence of a license application. In case of coinciding licenses for power plants and mining areas, we start investigating the field. When it's possible to eliminate these kinds of coincidences during our analysis on the field, the problems are resolved quickly. But there are also cases which we definitely need to refer to the court. Our aim is to see the export levels for our mines increase, but still our priority is to see both of our resources being operated. A wind power plant means more than its wind turbines. It also includes the transmission lines, and all these areas which accommodate the turbines and the transmission lines are subject to our opinion. For these kinds of evaluations, we set out a rule which doesn't satisfy our investors for energy plants. The protection distance of a turbine is 250 to 300 meters. But this buffer distance can be increased depending on the topographical specifics and the technique of mining operations. The distance may be decreased as well. However, we should always look into the interaction of the turbines and the technique of mining operations. Regardless of whether your license area is within this 1 kilometer protection area, this 300-meter buffer area that we recommend can be re-evaluated. If we have a mining area within the 700 meters after this 300 protection area, we wouldn't want to put an obstacles in front of mining operations. We also do not allow any obstacles to be put in front of mining areas just due to the licenses that were obtained beforehand. The existence of a mining license or mining search license is not an obstacle against the wind power plants in the area. What matters for us is whether there has been an actual investment in the area after obtaining the searching license for mining operations. If no mining substance is explored, the license for searching the mines will not create any problems for the wind power plants in the area. Only after the mines are explored and its amount is determined, as well as its quality, it starts posing an economical value. Our steps are carefully taken. Let me give an example from the past. Once there was a question whether to allocate a license for a wind power plant in an area where mining operations were carried out. The mining operator was searching for and producing copper and zinc. He is digging up to 100 meters, and the request for a wind power plant was on the surface of the ground. But there was a licensed area which belonged to the operator, and this area impeded with the requested area for a wind power plant application. So there was a physical coincidence, and as a rule, the case had to be brought up to the court, to the board. However, we just thought that our mining operators' activities were not on the ground. Because normally, if mining operators are working on the ground, they explode something and it can seriously affect the turbines. After discussing further, we decided not to refer the case to the board, and we decided in favor of the wind power plant investor. This is how we avoided wasting our wind potential, and we managed to maintain the mining activities. The Directorate General for Mining Affairs is behind the scenes, and our aim is to gain both resources to our country. We are acting as facilitators. But we have insufficiencies when it comes to knowledge exchange in between the institutions. EMRA issues licenses and sends these licenses to us. All these licenses and pre-licenses, especially the information about them, should definitely be communicated with us. This is how we can add these kinds of licensed areas in our databases in order to ensure that no coincidence takes place between an already invested area for a power plant and a mining operator who is willing to invest in the same area afterwards. But the establishment and construction of wind power plants take 3 to 4 years, and depending on the area, we can also allow mining operators to continue their explorational activities, especially throughout this 3 or 4 year process. Therefore, you can always access to these kinds of information items by consulting us. My most important recommendation to wind investors and other investors is to consult us before you decide on a certain field, so that you understand everything about the already existing mining licenses. This is how we can at least minimize the damages and losses to be suffered by the parties. This was all. Let me conclude my words. I hope we reach our goal of 20,000 megawatts. I'm very happy that you're here. It's amazing that you didn't refer the example that you gave to us to the board and decided in favor of the investor, wind investor, even when there were already mining operations in the area, and these operations were carried out under the ground. I was just about to think that wind investors should never get to coincide with mining operators. Before the amendments, the problems were bigger, because once the mining operators got their licenses, they were able to enjoy that license for 20 or even 30 years. But now the validity of these licenses depends on the operations, thanks to regular analysis carried out on the area. This is how we manage to facilitate the activities and procedures of wind investors.
Şimdilik sözlerimi bu şekilde kapatıyorum. İnşallah hedefimizdeki olan o 20.000 wattlık megawattlık enerjilerimize ulaşırız diye umut ediyorum.
Çok teşekkür ederiz Doğan Bey. İyi ki varsınız Doğan Bey. Son anlattığınız, buyurun lütfen yerinize, son anlattığınız ifadede derin kuyuda sonra çalışmalar yapılmasına rağmen yukarıda 100 metre, 200 metre yukarıda tepelerde resle alakalı konuyu kurula getirmeden, efendim, rüzgar Allah rüzgarcılarla madencileri karşılaştırmasın diyecektim. Ama şimdi böyle diyorum. Teşekkür ederim. Yani epey problem var. Tabii bu önemli. Daha önceden daha da maden kanunu biz düzeltmeden önce daha da büyük bir problem vardı. Çünkü madenciler ruhsatlarını aldığı zaman 20 sene, 30 sene, yıllarca yahut üzerinde o ruhsat alanlarına yatabiliyordu. Ama şimdi ruhsat almayı önce işte bir yıllık bir ihale, daha sonra görünür rezerv çalışmaları yapıldıktan sonra yeniden işletme ruhsat verilme şeklinde düzenlemeler yaptık. Böylece biraz daha rüzgarcıları açmış olduk. Çok teşekkür ederim. Sibel Hanım'dan başlayalım lütfen. Kendinizi de tanıtarak.
Sayın Başkan, saygıdeğer katılımcılar, hepiniz hoş geldiniz.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Sibel Demir. I've been working for the General Directorate for Spatial Planning for 7 years. Our office is directly related to the Ministry of Environment. Today I'm going to say a few words about the development plans relating to wind power plants. I'll talk about how we operate, what kind of documents we request, and how we decide on the development plans. The development plans of wind power plants can be approved by different authorities, being subject to various regulations. Our ministry was authorized to approve the development plans of wind power plants after the amendments that were made in the law in 2008. In 2011, the Ministry of Environment and Urban Planning was established. Our ministry was authorized once again when it comes to the approval of the development plans of wind power plants. As in all the development plan proposals that arrives in our ministry, the evaluation and analysis period of these plans can be phased out in 3 levels. Once the proposal is received by our ministry, we first look into whether necessary documents are in the proposal, including the license issued by EMRA, the environmental evaluation report, and necessary institutions' opinions, if any. What should a project owner take into consideration in the development plan? Firstly, information about the project owner, then the information about the ownership rights, land rights, and information about the plots. Our ministry was asked by EMRA to draw up a regulation. The reason was a lot of contradictions between the development plans approved by EMRA and those approved by us, both in terms of scaling and representation. The aim here was to avoid any kind of contradiction about expropriation. Upon this request, our ministry worked on a regulation, a draft regulation, by receiving the opinions of all the related parties. Our ministry has been carrying out activities based on this draft study, which hasn't been published yet. I really hope it is published soon. It will bring with it many changes. The proposal should include some documents, as I said, like the generation license by EMRA, environmental evaluation report, the ownership information, and here are what a project owner should take into account, like information about maps and plots. A wind power plant occupies a vast area, which can include a lot of ownership rights. As you know, it's almost impossible to approve an area which consists of 20-30 plots. That's why we always analyze these plots one by one. We also request explanation reports and development plans in different scales, prepared in compliance with the regulations. If there are approved upper scale plans, the proposed development plan should be in association with the upper scale plan. And the information about the project owner, including the certificate of competency, authorizations, and etc. Which opinions do we accept? The opinions of EMRA, the General Directorate for Renewable Energies, the General Directorate for Mining Affairs, the General Directorate of Forestry Affairs, Provincial Directorates of Food and Agriculture, General Directorate of Cultural Assets and Museums, Turkish General Staff in case of an energy plant of more than 200 megawatts, Turkish Electricity Transmission Company, and the General Directorate of Aviation, Civil Aviation, and related local authorities. Investor companies consulting us have always voiced their concerns about time limits, and the fact that we request so many opinions from so many authorities brings with it a lot of reactions. But we need to act in compliance with our existing communiques. For example, during the application, before the application for a license, EMRA asks again opinions, wants to see the opinions of some related authorities in a completely different logic. If the investor company is required to apply at the ministry level, it should follow these rules. EMRA application, an approved environmental evaluation report. I mean, these are all before applying at our ministry. And an approved project report. Some of the investor companies already have received some of the opinions that we expect. These reports and opinions sometimes are invalid or insufficient, and the entire file is submitted at the provincial directorates or at the governor's office, which send these files to our ministry. If all these issues are in compliance with the rules, approval procedure is completed. On the picture you see a development plan for a wind power plant in Istanbul, which covers a vast area, and this is the plotted map. calculations are made differently depending on the type of the ownership.
O yüzden bunların hani eksiksiz ve net bir şekilde tamamlanmış olması bizim ve aynı zamanda yatırımcının da lehine bir durum. Bu da başka bir resim.
Here are two wind power plants. Two plans are being evaluated by our ministry right now. We don't know how to approve these projects actually, because they coincide with each other. The fields for plants are very close to each other. The application and approval procedures are quite serious actually, but for the last couple of months there has been a very serious issue on our agenda. Even after we have come a long way, coordinates can be changed, or the investor comes up and tells us that the coordinates have changed by 5 meters or 10 meters, or he tells us that the license has not been amended yet by EMRA about this issue, and asks if we can still continue our procedures.
Bu açıkçası bizim makam katında da konuşuldu ve tartışıldı. Biz planımızı hem olumlu
All our plans are carried out in exact correlation with EMRA licenses.
koordinat listesine dayanarak yapıyoruz. Dolayısıyla öyle bir lisans gelecek olabilir ama şifai bilgilerle de biz işlemlerimizi yürütemeyiz. Ne zaman ki bize EPDK'dan tatil edilmiştir, şu şekilde koordinatlar dendiği takdirde, biz de gerekli görüyorsak eğer, başka kurumlara ya da yenilenmesi gerektiğini...
That's why it's impossible for us to accept these kinds of small amendments before EMRA amends the license. But these steps don't make anyone happy. This is a scene by Google Earth. Once we receive the opinion of the last authority that we expected, we act very rapidly to approve the proposal. Each Wednesday our commission gathers.
En son kurum görüşü geldi o hafta çarşamba günü, onu izleyen hafta çarşamba günü bizim komisyonumuz var.
The proposal is evaluated. The necessary calculations are made, and the plan is approved. After approval, we send the proposal back to the provincial so that we can deal with the complaints, if any, more properly. If there are any complaints, these are evaluated again at our office. And if a complaint is justified, we offer to amend the plan. The amended plan, if any, gets again suspended for a month. In case of no complaints, the plan earns full validity. Since 2012 to date, we have approved 8 wind power plant projects, and currently 9 projects are pending at our ministry for evaluation. Thank you very much.
Teşekkür ederiz. Bize de
I'm Yüksel Malkoç, representing the Ministry of Energy, the General Directorate of Renewable Energies. Why is wind energy favored so much? The reasons for it all over the world are pretty much the same. One is that wind has the potential to to meet the energy demand in the world significantly. It reduces energy costs and it doesn't have negative impacts on the environment. It contributes to energy security and independency, helps people in their fights against climate changes, also improves the rural development. This cartoon that you see on the slide tells everything about the difficulties people have to go through once they start projects about wind energy. This is the case all over the world, not only in Turkey. This is like a marathon, and those who finish the marathon successfully enjoy the right to start their projects or put them into practice. The process involves a lot of stakeholders, like those who are authorized to permit, those who act as investors. Here you can see the picture more clearly. But this marathon has a lot of questions, like if there is wind, questions about transmission, constructability, the various local regulations. What about aviation, bird migration directions, wildlife radioactive effects? Is it visual? Does it create noise pollution? Does it affect the military facilities? There are thousands of obstacles in array. In Turkey, these kinds of permits should be obtained as well. What should we do to develop a successful wind project? There are key rules. And even when you exclude one of these rules, it's impossible for you to carry it out successfully. The first rule is the wind. Even a difference of 1 second can significantly affect you. The second rule is the land. Whether the land you find can really benefit the environment and the public. Can you really use the land? What about the permits? You always need to receive each of these permits, and there are lots of constraints. Transmission. Is there a buyer? Is there a purchase warrant? And finance. For you to carry out a project, you need to have the necessary amount of funds. These are key rules, so you always need to comply with each of them. Timing is critical. Even one single deficiency can destroy the entire project. You're always expected to compete against time. In the absence of necessary permits, your project can be even cancelled. We really need to facilitate these procedures in order to proper the timing aspect of these projects. Because when a project gets entirely cancelled, it means that all the time and investments an investor made gets wasted.
Dolayısıyla süreler çok kritik. Şimdi rüzgar kaynaklarında da aynı madende olduğu gibi yerinde değerlendirilmesi lazım. Doğalgaz, kömür, nükleer enerjiden farklı olarak istediğimiz yere rüzgarı...
It's also impossible to carry a wind potential to another area, so this resource should be used at the site where there is wind. But there is this exception, according to which licensed projects can carry their equipment and the plant to another area if they prove that it's impossible for them to operate at the site. This is a very serious issue and a very serious right. That's why we really need to work on the technical aspects of related regulations. return over investment, and it's completely a financial aspect. During the development phase of a wind project, you need to take into account the wind, the land, environmental constraints, transmissions, buyers and funds. The first phase is development, then comes pre-license and license, which is followed by finance, preparation for construction, establishment and commissioning. Each phase requires some permits. Here is the list of permits.
Ölçümle başlıyor rüzgar projeleri. Ölçüm için bir izin almamız gerekiyor. Bu izin de kimden alacağız?
You first need to start with measures, and for this you need a permit. For you to receive a measure permit from the Forestry Ministry, it will take you 5 or 6 months, even 1 year from time to time. That's why investors hire a measurement area in some private establishments. Then the necessity of an environmental report, project approvals, development plans, a pre-permission from the Ministry of Forestry, etc.
Sayabileceğimiz birçok izin. Enerji Bakanlığı bunların neresinde baktığımız zaman
What about the permissions to be granted by the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources? The compliance of the plant site and the compliance of wind turbines, project approvals, technical interference approvals, and the procedures to be followed while determining domestic contributions.
ve TÜBİTAK arasında yapılan anlaşma gereği bu işlem bizim üzerimizden yenilenebilir enerjiler müdürlüğü üzerinden gidiyor. Dolayısıyla burada da bir iznimiz var. Artık daha sonra yerli katkı oranının belirlenmesi ve bunlarla ilgili sonuç raporlarının oluşturulması ile ilgili bazı Enerji ve Tabii Kaynaklar Bakanlığı olarak üzerimize düşen görevler var. Ve bu süreçlere baktığımız zaman gerçekten tamamen izin almakla geçiyor bir ömür.
As I said, timing is critical, especially while you are searching for these permits. That's why we really need to establish a system which makes all these steps faster.
Sisteme baktığımız zaman bugünkü mevcut bilgisayar teknolojisiyle geldiğimiz seviye itibariyle artık bütün işlemler bilgisayar üzerinden yapılma imkanı var.
From now on, every kind of action can be carried out on a computerized way. Emrah Teyyaş, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Energy, General Directorate for Mining Affairs are all working within the same system. And all the permits are issued by these kinds of authorities. That's how we can use a computerized system so that everything becomes faster and more convenient. This is the time we adopt to using such a system. We can use a software system, and we can even name it according to wind power plants, but this way we can really work faster. All our authorities have an amazing amount of technological power. The installed capacity, the installed technological capacity we have is really high.
Gerçekleştirebilirsek ancak bu restlerdeki süreçleri, zamanlamaları yakalamış oluruz. Bir baktığımız zaman kurumlarımızda gerçekten müthiş bir bilgisayar gücü var. Yani bildiğimizdeki yani 2500-2700 megawattlık rüzgar gücü gibi inanın kurumlarımızda da bu kadar bundan daha fazla bilgisayar kurulu gücü var. Yani bu güç gerçekten yani istenilen amaç için istenilen şekilde kullanılabiliyor. Baktığımız zaman ne yazık ki kullanılmıyor.
Unfortunately, we are not using it to the highest extent. We only use it for the purposes of announcements. These networks of the authorities can somehow be associated We have some examples in other countries who work this way, and this is a very efficient way of working together. We can even reduce the time wasted during these procedures by 50%. Let me share my conclusions and recommendations. In general, permissions for wind projects require the longest amount of time within a project development phase. In this regard, there is a lack of coordination in between the authorities, differences between applications, bureaucratic actions, permitting procedures, and the guides and information provided are not always clear and understandable. The license and permission periods can be shortened thanks to a resource planning software program which can be run on a computer based on the mutual platform for different authorities. The human factor should also be minimized and all the procedures should be standardized. Thank you.
Yenilenebilir Enerji Genel Müdürlüğü'nden değerli kardeşimizin bu son bilgileriyle efendim halimiz bitmiş oluyor. Hakikaten ortaya koymuş olduğu
The information shared with us can also be considered as a huge list of obstacles. However, it can be also considered as an indicator for an important level of progress.
Evet. Çünkü 2005 yılında yasaya çıkardığımız zaman sadece yasa
When we published the law in 2005, there was only the law and its articles. Now you can see that the legislation is quite sophisticated. We have specialized people, and there is an enviable level of integration in between different authorities, including the Ministry of Energy, EMRA, the General Directorate of Mining Affairs, and etc. That's why it's possible to say that Turkey has been taking solid steps. Thank you very much for your participation. And before anything, I'd like to thank the Turkish Wind Energy Association. We can only improve as long as we discuss about it. I'd really like to thank them a lot. Do we need to receive questions? Do you have questions? If you have any questions, I have questions to two of the panelists. You haven't mentioned anything about the calibration in your regulations, because it can sometimes be impossible to keep up with developments about measurements. These periods should be announced by your General Directorate. The other question is whether you have do you have a process about the licenses of exploring and operating mines? I'm asking this because on your website we can see the licenses, but we don't know if there are operations based on these licenses. Other question is whether there are wind power plant projects waiting for the board's approval, the board established by the General Directorate for Mines.
bu kurulda bekleyen RES projeleri var. Teşekkür ederim.
We are planning to do some amendments in our communique in line with the changes in EMRA regulation. This is when we are going to include the calibration in our instruments.
Kapsam içerisinde alacağız. Yani orada yapılması gereken sizlerin görüşlerinizi alırız.
Doğan Bey buyurun.
Öncelikli olarak şu anda
We don't have a wind power plant project pending approval at our directorate. We sometimes solve the problems of shifting wind turbines by increasing the increasing the capacity of turbines and decreasing the amount of towers.
Türkiye'nin kapasitesi 2 megawattlık. İşte toplamda da 10 direk olsun. 20 megawattlık bu projelerde veya daha doğrusu daha çok sayıda tüpün olursa diyoruz ki tüp kapasitesini artırın, sayıyı azaltın. Hani direkt sayısını azaltma yöntemiyle de bazen bunları çok rahat çözüyoruz. Çözümümüzden dolayı da bugün şimdiye kadar buna pek yansıtmadı. Hani çözüm yolları açısından baktığımız zaman. Ruhsatlar konusunda
The period of licenses for exploring and operating mines can change between 3 to 7 years. The first group mines and the second group mines directly receive an operating license, the validity of which is 10 years. Even though there is a license for operation, some mines may not be operating. And if this is the case, we don't use the existence of such a license as an excuse against investments, wind energy investments in the same area. But if such a mine is under current operation and if there are investments in the place, which means that there is a coincidence between the mine and the wind energy plant, we bring up the case to the board or we compare the two.
Benim ismim Recep Aslan. Çatalca'da bir proje yaptık.
We had a project in Çatalca. We were told that there wasn't a mining operation or exploration license in the area. We got this letter confirmation and we started our project. But then a license came up, so our project had to be delayed by 3 months. We offered to EMRA that we could shift 3 of our turbines out of 20, but I believe that the validity of exploring and operating license, which is 7 years, is really long. Within this process, I won't be able to install turbines, and the court always will decide in favor of the miner. My request is that you really reduce the mine exploring period. You can't possibly occupy an area by only receiving an exploring license.
Bir alanı hükmedemezsiniz. Sahiplendiremezsiniz. Böyle bir hakkım. Ben onu santral buldum. Bir yılda projeyi bitireceğim. Adama ben keyfine bırakacağım. Böyle bir şey yok.
Şimdi öncelikle şunu söyleyeyim. Bahsettiğimiz sürelerde şöyle bir ayrımı biraz daha detaylı söylemekte fayda var.
The exploring period for some mines is 2 years, but there are some types of mines under some categories and their exploration process period is 7 years. These periods are not given for nothing. These periods get delayed or lengthened on several phases. A 7-year license means that a mining operator has completed the requirements to lengthen this period. These licenses and the periods are not unconditional.
2 yıl genel ormanda yine istemiş olduğu minimum faaliyetleri yerine getirirse ondan sonra detay aramaya geçebilir. Yani her sürecin arasında fiili olarak faaliyeti yerine getirmesi gerekiyor. Yani başlangıçta hani biz 7 yıllık bir süre verdik. Bu süre bir koşulsuz kullanılan bir süre değil. Eskiden yani
In the past, operators were able to get a license for 5 years, and they even got to not work on the fields at all, and they were able to close down their mines at the end of the 5 years. We can also license operators working on different categories of mines, and it helps us create a competitive environment, urging the operators to really work on their fields.
diyoruz ki sen hiçbir ekonomi madenini ara. Sen 4 bir maden ara diyoruz. Bulunduğu zaman işletilme aşamasına geldiği zaman yine orada da çakışmalar söz konusu olabilir. Onu ne yapıyoruz? Teknikle göre çözüyoruz. Şimdi buradaki restlerdeki çakışmalar
The problem with coincidences between mines and wind power plants is that the investors only apply or consult our general directorate during the development plan phase of their project. That's why we recommend investors to announce themselves in our databases so that these kinds of coincidences can be detected earlier. I think the problems are stemming from the older licenses.
artı değerlendirme yapılıp da özel izinden dönüştüyse özellikle ki o da bir adım daha ilerisi bu durumda biz bu alanı tamamıyla ne yaptık? Özel izin olarak ilan ettiğimiz zaman müracaat geldiği zaman ilgili kurum izni gelmeden nedir ilgili kurum olarak da önce bir genel olarak biz değerlendiriyoruz oraya gelen bir müracaatı. Bu arada baktık EPDK'dan da aynı şekilde uygun görüş alma süreci olmadan bu alana zaten ara ruhsatı vermiyoruz o 1 yıllık süre içerisinde. Yani süreç bu şekilde işlerse problem yok ama eski ruhsatlarda ne olmuş? Verilen ruhsatlarda veya lisanslardaki çakışmalar hep genelde
But I had applied to your general directorate and I was told that there wasn't any licenses, mining licenses on the area. I applied twice. The second time was in 2006 and I was again told that there was no license there coinciding with my project, and I started my construction in 2007. Even the assembly was initiated. This was when the mining operator came up to me and showed the court files, and he managed to stop my activities by court order, and all my applications were in written.
şöyle askeri
But you're talking about 2006 and 7.
2010'daki yapmış olduğumuz değişiklikten sonra bu alanlar sisteme işlenmiş
Actually, the new developments only took place after the amendments we made in 2010.
olmuş ama sisteme işlenmiş değil. Sistemde gözükmüyor. Daha sonra ne oldu oraya? Bilmem artık 2008 veya 2009'da bir ruhsat müracaatı gelmiş. Bahsedilen kurum daha sonra gerçekleşen bir olay. Ama bunu şu
Even though our opinions were shared with you before this date, nothing was necessarily processed on our database. But such a thing wouldn't be experienced today. The timing was problematic.
Hanımefendi buyurun, son olarak sizinkini de alalım ve bitirelim.
Merhaba.
When we change the coordinates of a wind project, do we need to repeat the entire permitting process?
Rüzgar koordinatları diyorum. Teknolojiyle. Efendim?
When we change the coordinates of a wind project, do we need to repeat the entire permitting process?
Ama imar planlama sürecini değerlendiriyoruz. Koordinatları hani
Depending on the change, we need to go through the development plan again. I'm not sure about whether you need to receive a second environmental report.
teşekkür ederim.
What do you mean by the changes in the coordinates in wind projects? It's not a change. Let's say that it's an amendment.
Bunlar çok büyük mesafeler değildir yani. Evet efendim, çok
Thank you very much for your attention.
Şimdi değerli panelistlere izin verirseniz TWEC'in vermiş olduğu sertifikalar var. Onları takdim edeceğim. Çok sağ olun.